Welcome to this week's Rob's Country. We're going to be looking at law. We're going to look at something that you should be knowing about as far as soil is concerned and veggies. But first of all, John, the season for wool.
Yeah, it's been very interesting, Rob, this season. We've had quite a bit of volatility. Obviously, I won't bore you about the currency, but it has been volatile,
it's been coming down a bit.
And it's moved a lot.
Yeah.
And we've had oil price movements and things which are relevant for wool because a lot of wool's man-made fibre substitutes come out of oil substitutes. So if you're talking particularly fibres like polypropylene, even some polyesters, they become cheaper to produce because of that, which affects wool demand. So what we've seen is the market actually from July onwards, it held up very well through sort of July, August, September through to December. Through January it did come back, but with the lower Kiwi it seems to have stabilised, and demand has actually picked up in the last few weeks. So all in all, it's looking reasonably positive. We're in the high supply period now, January, February, March, the traditional high supply period for the crossbred part of the clip, which still represents probably 80% of the total clip. So yeah, so it's onwards and get on with the job, and things are moving quite well.
How's the pipeline? Is there plenty in it?
Well, it's interesting. China still taking 55% of the clip. I've just come back. They've taken quite a bit of wool for shipment after the Chinese New Year. The Chinese New Year celebration's the 18th of February, and generally the factories actually close. A lot of the factory workers go back into the hometown, if you like, which is in country. So that probably that has already started, and some of those factories close for 3 to 4 weeks. So we would expect the Chinese, they'll certainly slow down in February, probably from about the 10th onwards for 2 weeks. It's a big celebration, and so that will happen. So, but they've already bought their immediate requirements, which is good.
So that should sort of whistling down the pipeline.
That should support the market in the next 3 or 4 weeks, and then they'll be back and continue from March onwards. So the lower price caused by the lower price foreign currency price caused by the lower Kiwi dollar certainly helps stimulate demand.
Sorry.
And it has helped trading full stop.
Brilliant. What about the other 45% of the clip?
Europe, yes. All countries have been in through January. A lot of New Zealand wool still goes to countries like Italy, UK, Egypt, Turkey, even places that you wouldn't think, like some even gets into Estonia, would you believe? So, but Europe has been quite active as well. So, all in all, the demand picture certainly picked up since January. Up till December, it was quite spasmodic because the farmer won't like hearing this, but the price level of New Zealand wool was quite high in comparison to competing fibres like UK wool and other origins. It was higher, but the gap was too high, so it's come more in line now.
People talk about the Korean War and a pound for a pound. Ukraine's not going to help us out, is it?
No, not unless...
That's a shame. I mean, they're going to fight anyway.
Yeah. So it's business as usual, really. But, it's been a bit of a juggling act in your mind just where you see the market going. Because, as I say, you've had this oil price thing. You've had the European situation, the European economies. There's a bit of a question mark there. The States seems to be the bright spot, if any. China's actually slowed up quite a bit as well. But demand conditions, from where we sit, business continues and it looks reasonably positive.
Good. What about the drought?
Yeah, the drought is always in the back of your mind. There's always ramifications for drought, I think, for all farmers and everybody in the trade, especially in the wool industry. Obviously, we would love to see the danger averted, but
well, you're not going to.
No, you've got to think about it. And of course, for wool, what it means is that farmers won't share. In some cases, they'll send their stock, if they have to, straight to the works. They don't share because in a lot of cases that encourages the animal to eat more after the wool's gone off the the fleece or the second shear removes it from the body of the sheep, and they don't want that. So, and the other major thing that we keep in our mind is the actual affects the micron of the wool, and when there's stress to the sheep's fibre, what happens is, in a lot of cases, the wool becomes finer and more tender. So we've got to keep that in the back of our mind as well. So I do really think that the drought situation is actually helping the market as well, because people have it in the back of their minds, and the client as well, that they need to be securing their supplies now rather than later, because there is a question mark
about capital stock.
Yeah, and just volume of product through, like, come April, May, June, just whether the quantities will be there as already rostered. So I think it certainly is having an effect on the market as we speak.
Yesterday with the nor'wester, you couldn't see across the city for dust. Yeah, and that's another problem. I mean, you obviously, the scours will be working flat out.
The scours are busy, and of course what you've just talked about obviously affects them as well. Lower yields, all the rest of it. But the machinery as it is today, it's fine. But to come back to the drought, it is a real concern for us as well. Yeah, definitely.
But, I mean, you've got to work on exporting it with less and less capital stock.
That's right.
Being used.
That's right. But that's been the case for some time. I mean, as far as sheep numbers are concerned, that's been the case for some time, especially we've seen in the South Island. More pronounced in the south than the north over the last 3 to 4 years, definitely. So, yeah, that's running a wool scour certainly a lot more of a challenge than it was 4 or 5 years ago, just because of the volumes of wool available.
You must have to work hard. I know you go to China a lot, you go overseas a lot, and you're just building those bridges and building relationships.
Well, you have to, because it's a competitive industry within New Zealand anyway, but you've always got to keep in your mind that wool is still battling man-made fibres, it's still battling a lot of other origins from other countries. We have to keep New Zealand wool in front of our clients' minds, and I've found over the years the best way to do that's face-to-face, particularly in the Asian countries, because they really value the commitment and the time that you actually take. They actually appreciate it, and invariably, and I can't say this for all European clients, invariably they'll try and do some business with you at the time to actually, recognise that effort that you've made, which is nice, because you can't always guarantee that. So travel's very important in our business, and I think it pays big dividends. It really does.
Right. John, thank you very much indeed. After the break, we'll be talking law with Fleur from Harmans.
With all the latest innovations in the world of technology, Shift has everything you need to stay informed and in the know. Shift, 2:15 on Monday, right here on CTV.
We asked ourselves, what statement sums up our company culture and sets us apart from others? Serving one another. It means we have respect for our customers, our workmates, our suppliers, and the communities in which we live and work. These are the things that matter to us. Serving one another is the foundation of our business. HEB Construction, the total infrastructure package.
When we come back, William Hewell from the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment will tell us about their technical guidance for rebuilding and repairing properties in earthquake-affected areas right here in Canterbury.
EQC gave me a nice payout, but what do I do now?
The insurance company finally settled on the agreed amount, but where do I start?
There's so much to organise. Who do I call first?
I don't have the time to be running around after contractors and doing paperwork.
Irrigation is the future for farming in New Zealand, but like any technology, you can't be expected to get the most out of it on your own. Hydro Services is the key to maximising your results. On-farm irrigation management, minimising drainage losses, minimising power usage and maximising efficiency. Soil moisture solutions, soil water holding capacity assessments, resource consent applications and on-farm workshops, all there in the one place. Hydro Services, your one-stop for irrigation management and soil moisture measurement solutions.
Don't get caught out. With the Super Mini Booster, the power is in your hands. As the smallest power pack in its class, the Super Mini Booster will get you back on track in no time. Trusted by leading professionals, the Super Mini Booster has all the power you need. Super Mini Booster, the power is in your hands.
Colour in your life. Colour Steel, the roof of New Zealand.
Hi, I'm Chris Lynch. Join me every Monday at 8:30 on CTV as we discuss the issues affecting you, your family and everything to do with Canterbury. That's CTV 8:30 right here.
Welcome back to Rob's Country. There's two things that you know you'll never avoid. One is tax. Sadly, one is death, which means we need wills and powers of attorney. Let's do wills first.
Sure.
Wills, are they really strong because people put a whole lot of stuff into trusts and things?
Look, wills are a really important document. They take care of your personal assets. So if you have a family trust, they won't take care of that. You should do a memorandum of guidance in relation to your family trust and the assets that that trust holds. But for your personal assets, so that might be bank accounts, investments, you might have stocks, bonds, that kind of thing, whatever it is, whatever
Cars.
You've got. Cars, yeah, exactly. Anything that's owned by you personally should be dealt with by you in a will.
So when do you, for example, put a house into a trust, or do you own it and will it?
Oh, a couple of good questions. Both.
Both? You can do either?
You can do either. I think most people tend to put their property into a trust, particularly younger people, when they purchase. It's a really good time to form a trust and put the property in because you're just paying one set of registration fees and that kind of thing. So it makes sense to do it all at the same time. Sometimes it can be a little bit costly, so that might put some people off, but it is cost effective if you think about it because you're only doing it once. If you wait and do it later and there's lending involved, you've got to go through the process of changing all that lending as well as re-registering and stuff. So if you're thinking about a family trust, do it now when you purchase. And do it when you're young. Don't wait until you're older because then it might not have the same benefits or the benefits you're thinking that it's going to have.
I'm rather embarrassed, Fleur, because I just discovered the other day that my will hadn't been updated for probably about 20 years.
Well, that's dreadful.
And my ex-wife was going to collect everything.
Well, that's fabulous. It's fabulous
Wonderful
for your ex-wife.
But you would think, wouldn't you, after all the times I've talked about wills on this program, I would have known to go and get a new one.
You really need to think about it every time something happens in your life, anything major. A marriage will nullify your old will. So if we've got a will that's prior to our marriage, and then we get married, that old will, it doesn't have any validity anymore. So you need to do a new one because you effectively haven't got one. The same can't be said when you get divorced, however.
So that hangs in there.
It does. So you really need to do something about changing that will.
With the World Cricket Cup coming up, I'm going to give you a curved ball.
Righto.
We've now got, because of Helen Clark and her regime, if you've been together for 3 years, you're married.
Yes. Well.
So you need to redo your will.
Well,
so I told you it was a curveball.
It was a curveball, wasn't it? Actually, I don't know that it's actually the case. It's marriage or in contemplation of marriage. So I don't think just being in a de facto relationship would trigger it.
So when you get engaged, it's contemplation?
You need to actually put that in your will. So if I were going to remarry, I don't think my husband would appreciate it, but if I was going to remarry...
No, he would probably get quite noisy, actually.
He would probably get quite noisy. I would need to say in my will, in contemplation of my coming marriage to whomever, I make this my last and final will, that kind of thing.
Yep.
If you don't have that in it and you go and get hitched, then...
But seriously, if you are living in a de facto relationship, it would be very, very prudent of you to trot along to Harmons or your lawyers.
Absolutely, very prudent of you to truck along to Harmons and your lawyers, if not just for the sake of the will, also things like property relationship agreements and that sort of thing, to make sure that what you actually think is going to happen if things should go awry are actually going to happen.
Because, you know, it's dead easy. You can be flatmates who get on very, very well at university.
And then all of a sudden a relationship blooms, and then people look at... There's all sorts of criteria that they look at, Rob. It's not as easy as going, right, you're living together, that's it. There is all sorts of criteria that they would have to prove. But, yeah, I mean, it becomes tricky when that relationship actually started. When was the start date?
Yeah, exactly. So, and it doesn't take 7 nights a week apparently either. But anyway, that's a totally different subject.
It doesn't take 7. You don't have to be living together. So there are all sorts of factors that go into whether you're a couple or not. So it's really important, wills, to make sure that you have what you want to happen when you shuffle off this mortal coil. Put it on a piece of paper and make sure it's right with your lawyer.
Yep, and young people do die, so...
Absolutely, it's not something that, I mean, as you know, I lead the seniors team at Harmons, but it's not just something that seniors should be doing, it's something that we should all be doing. Assets, children, you need a will.
Absolutely. Enduring power of attorney, now there's 2, I understand, health and welfare and finance.
That's exactly right. So personal care and welfare takes care of medical treatment, health issues. If you were to have a serious medical event and require residential care, that kind of thing, this is the person who's going to make those choices for you. Enduring power of attorney in relation to property, that is bank accounts, real property, so bricks and mortar, as well as personal property, bank accounts, utilities, if you had a Valentine's card or a farmer's card, that kind of thing. This is the person or persons who's going to be able to help you deal with that if you can't deal with it for yourself.
And that's where you, I mean, in my case, I was health and welfare because I was here.
Yep.
And there's a hell of a lot involved with it. I mean, I was getting nurse moored in and doing all sorts of things and arranging stuff for the vice regals, as they called my parents. They thought they were royalty, you see. But that's fair enough. Yeah. So, but it's a very powerful document, isn't it?
It is, and it's really important that when you're sitting down, you're making those decisions with your lawyer, that you think about the fact that you are giving a huge amount of power to somebody else. You're giving somebody else the ability to step into your life and make decisions for you. So it's really important you think it all the way through. It's really important that you choose people who would do the things that you want them to do if they put themselves in your shoes. So that's a little bit different than doing the things that they think they should do. So it's really important you turn your mind to who is going to be able to actually take themselves out of what they need and put themselves in my shoe and do what I need.
Does it always need to be a family member?
No, not at all. It can be whomever you want. You might have a close family friend. With property, we find a lot of our seniors particularly like to have an independent person, like an accountant. Often they've known them for a really long time. And that person's their safety valve to make sure that everything's done the right way. So,
in fact, with the finance part, it's probably very wise not to have a member of the family in some cases.
Well, in some cases, it's really important, again, to think it all the way through. You know, if that person hasn't always been good with money in their own lives, there's probably not a lot of good sense in making them your attorney for property, because they're going to have the ability to deal with your finances. So you need someone who really knows what they're doing, who really is very careful and very good with their finances and can help you look after yours.
Once again, my own situation, there's 2 brothers and that's it. But if you've got a family of 6 or 7 and one is in charge of finance and there's 6 or 7 other people who are watching and saying, where did the money go? Yes.
It's really important. In fact, it's part of the Act. You must keep financial records. So if you're doing something for your mum and dad, or the viceroyals as you call them, then you need to be keeping a record of everything you do. So keeping your receipts, writing it down, pasting them in a book. I tell my clients to tell their attorneys to get a book, and every time they do something, write it down and keep the receipts, paste them in there. Make sure that if there's questions they're ever asked, they can go, actually, yeah, I did take that money out on the 10th of March to pay such and such, and you can see here's the receipt. Easy, no questions.
Right. So when do we go and talk to our lawyers about powers of attorney?
Now. They're not documents that you should wait for. They're a wee bit like personal and contents insurance, Rob. They're the documents that you have in the background in case you ever need them, in the hopes that you never do.
So if you do that now and the person's still very, very okay,
yep.
That just sits there and doesn't do anything until it's needed.
Absolutely. So with personal care and welfare, it can only come into effect if you're judged to no longer have capacity. So it's wholly lacking capacity. It's not up to you or me, it's up to a doctor. So those are safeguards put in place for the donors. And in relation to property, you get to make a choice. So you can make a choice whether it comes into effect straight away. A lot of my seniors like that because it means their family can help them out now as they're starting to get a little bit less certain of their own decision making. Or you can choose to have it only come in if you lose capacity. So choices all the way through.
Fleur, thank you.
You're welcome.
You're amazing. You're wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. Now, vegetables. It's been a long, hot summer already, so I caught up with Robin Oakley to see how he saw the season so far.
Being the driest I've known, to have a dry spring, crops coming out of the ground. With hindsight, there's a lot of crops that we drilled. We probably should have gone and irrigated them before we even went in and planted them. And you're just not used to going out and having to irrigate crops when they're still coming up and getting established. And so it's been a long irrigation season so far, and there's no end in sight. And unlike the grain farmers who've got all their crops in now and they'll get a harvest done and then start getting excited about getting some winter feed and next year's crops in, we're still pushing on through this, and we'll all be faced with the same thing very shortly with the consequence of an autumn drought, which is always far more severe than a summer drought.
Because nobody's predicting when this will end.
No, well, haven't seen or heard any forecasts or any extended ones that are talking when it's going to stop, but we can be fairly sure it'll stop with flood rains, and they'll cause a lot of havoc, so we'll go from one thing to the other.
Plants get stressed in the heat and want to go to seed. How are vegetables?
Yeah, similar. The biggest problem is unevenness of the soil. I mean, we're growing crops this year that have basically had zero rainfall, so the only moisture they've got is from the irrigation. And some of our crops are under pivots, but a lot of it we're growing down here under guns and rotorainers and turbo rains and things, and they tend to put the water on a little bit quicker, and you tend to be putting a bit more on, a bigger gap before the return time, so the lighter ground doesn't hold enough and dries out quickly again. The wetter ground, it runs into it a bit, so you get quite a bit of unevenness coming through in the crop on a year like this.
So it's very hard to keep it up and keep it even?
Oh, very, very difficult. It's as I was saying before, there's no room for slippage. If you missed one day, that's straight away relating to crop yield. You don't catch it up again, it's gone.
So what's it doing as far as prices are concerned?
So far, no impact on pricing for us, but it'll start, I would expect, for there to be much of an impact on price, we're concerned it's got to be a national thing going on. There's got to be dry in other regions and actual significant reductions in yield and crops. And then we may start to see an improvement in price.
So let's run through your list. How are the spuds looking?
The potatoes on the whole are looking good. The quality's looking good, and we've kept the water up on those. Probably a priority crop, and we've kept up with those. So I'm pretty happy with how the quality and yield's looking on those. Although they might be down a whisker, but looking good. Broccoli's been a struggle to keep the water up too, and any little light bits of ground they just come to nothing. They just get too hot and dry, and the big difference with a crop like of a broccoli, it's either up to quality or it's not. It's not like it's, say, a grain crop where the yield might be down 10 or 20%. If your broccoli's down 10 or 20%, it's either in or out, so it's out. So you'll get a reduced recovery rate because of that. And with some of these,
those in.
Yeah, they'll just get mulched in at the finish. They won't get harvested. Fortunately, so far we've been on good ground and we've kept the water up and haven't had too much of that. It's from now going forward that'll be the most concern. Stuff being planted around that sort of Christmas, New Year. No rain over the next period of time. That's going to have grown through a lot of heat and dry, and you just can't keep the water even over that time. So we'd expect a bit of yield reduction through that time. You get hot days like today when you suddenly hit into the 30s. That'll be detrimental onto the quality that we'll get in about 2 weeks' time. So it doesn't matter how much water or irrigation you've got in the ground, that bit of heat, it just makes them physiologically go a bit wobbly.
So it makes us go wobbly too, Robin.
Doesn't it, on a nor'west day? Yes.
What about your pumpkins?
Pumpkins, they've been a bit on the back tit, so to speak, this year, with prioritising the other crops. The pumpkins normally wouldn't have needed irrigating in the season as early as what they needed it this year, and whilst they needed it, they didn't get it because we didn't have enough water to the return times that we'd normally have on the other crops. We had to get back quicker, and the pumpkin was always on the next in line, and it got shortcutted, so it's missed out. We're trying to catch up with them now, but yeah, we'll see how they go. They're a crop that likes it a bit dry anyway, so I think we're getting to them in time, but ideally I'd like to have been to them 2 or 3 weeks early with the water.
Red beet?
The beetroot, that's looking good. We've prioritised that, and we've got a good stand of beetroot. In fact, it's even better than last year's, but once again having to keep the water up, but because it's quite a small area, it's not difficult to do that.
So apart from some things being pre-cooked in the paddock, it's a long, hot, dry summer.
Yes, long, hot, dry summer. Long days, keeping all the irrigation going and checking that it's staying going, and you've got about 5 different machines we're shifting down here, and that's not counting irrigators going around on other lease blocks. There's plenty to keep in front of.
It eats into your margin, Robin.
Yeah, but often if you get a dry year, there's a lot of extra cost to putting water on, but somewhere along the line you usually pick it up somewhere with an increased price. There's usually, if the droughts throughout the rest of the country on all whole, the yields are down a bit, and as I always say, the pricing is always driven down on the thinking that there's an oversupply. There's never an oversupply. Often there's a plentiful supply, and when there's plentiful to adequate supply, you only need a little bit less, and then all of a sudden, it can start to tighten up and get short. And instead of the price moderating a little bit, it can go a bit silly. So there's always a bit of time for catch up there.
In a season like this, where it's hot and dry, what's your disease and pest pressure like?
Well, that can go both ways. Some crops will get a bit stressed, and that actually makes them more vulnerable to disease and also pests. The weaker plants attract the greeblies, and with the warmer weather their life cycles are much shorter, so therefore you get much higher pressure. The potato psyllids, we were seeing significant numbers of those from much earlier this year in the traps, so we've been onto those earlier. We're seeing more diamondback moth coming through in the broccoli crops. Normally would have, with our other normal measures, would have reasonable control. This year we're having to do a lot more control for those because of the heat and those life cycles coming around faster. And we're only really just starting to come up to the difficult time now. It's only the start of February, and that February-March can usually be the high pressure months, and we're under a reasonable amount of pressure now, so there's lots to look forward to there yet.
In a manner of speaking.
Yes, and the only thing is, like the potatoes, with this warm, dry weather period, there's been very little disease and stuff have to worry about there, which is a good thing. But we had that bit of weather last week, which can get a bit of mildews and alternarias and things going, and when the plant's a bit under stress, so we'll be watching them carefully, closely this week to see that doesn't cause them too much trouble.
I don't think I want to be doing that sort of job, really. I'd rather talk about it than try to balance everything with this heat. After the break, though, we're going to be talking about fires. So